That's a clown question, bro.
Hi, what's up on you?
So I'm gonna kick some dirt.
He gets on base.
Just a bit outside.
I'm not the type of player that's going to be Johnny Hustle.
If you don't want me to watch the ball, you can go get it out of the ocean.
Welcome to the show to be named later, where we're talking baseball kind of whenever. I am your host, Chris Gianta. On the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, it's been another good week of research. I think we outdo ourselves every week with the research that we do on these players and teams. We've got a lot in store for you guys today. We got Mickey Mantle. We got the 0-1 Diamondbacks, the youngest team to win the World Series ever.
Yeah, and you mentioned our research. Our first history episode was George Brett and the 2012 Tigers, and we did 8 pages, and we were like,
oh my God, 8
we
pages.
are on top of it, man. And this last one was 16 and a half. You can round up to 17.
It's down to the 17th page. Yeah.
Yeah.
We figured stuff out along the way. Needless to say, such a thing.
Yeah, we do have a lot, and I think there's a lot to research on Mickey Mantle just because of what he meant to American culture in general. But yeah, and not a lot of major league news going around, so not much to pay attention to there. Just kind of some more inside stuff that the public doesn't really know about.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. But yeah, actually, this episode, I'm going to explain what we're doing before we get into
breaking tradition, Chris.
I'm gonna throw the audience a curveball here. So, because there's
wait, hold on. Right, go ahead.
Because what are you trying to do there?
I just banged on a trash can to let him know that a curveball's coming.
Oh, sorry. I think my audio is down a little bit. But
okay.
But anyway, because there's no baseball going on as of now, as of May 19th, 2020, whenever you may be hearing this, there is no baseball, so we decided to go more history-based, kind of as a lesson to ourselves and to the audience, and kind of modernize how we look at these teams and these players. So Daniel has picked 30 teams, like the 2001 Diamondbacks that we are going to be talking about. I have picked
one for each
30
franchise.
players. Yeah, he's done one for each franchise. I kind of picked my random assortment of players kind of based on era, position, what they meant to the game. I've picked my 30 players. And at the end of every episode, we pick a number 1 through 25 now. Whatever number is assigned to the team, whatever number is assigned to the player, that is the team and player we will be talking about in the next week. That is what we're going to be researching for the next week. And last week, those numbers landed on the 2001 Arizona Diamondbacks and Mickey Mantle. And first, we're going to be talking about Mickey Mantle in the episode description. If you only want to hear about the 2001 Diamondbacks, I have time-stamped it for you. So, you don't have to listen to Mickey Mantle if you don't want to. Go right ahead, listen to the 2001 Diamondbacks. It's going to be a very good half of the episode. So, Daniel, talk about the origins of Mickey Mantle.
So, Chris, when we talk about these American-born players like Mantle, they're usually from the main 3 states of California, Texas, and Florida. Mickey Mantle is actually not one of those guys. He was born in Oklahoma, in fact. And spoiler alert, he is the wins above replacement leader among all Oklahoma-born position players, I believe. And he was actually born to be a baseball player. He was named after Hall of Fame catcher Mickey Cochrane. So, baseball in his blood already. It's Cochran, I'm sorry. His father believed that managers would soon implement platoon systems, which they eventually did. So he taught Mickey how to switch hit, left and right, of course. And Mickey resisted at first. But his dad was a righty, and he would pitch to Mickey when he was left-handed. and his grandfather was a lefty and pitched to Mickey when he was right-handed. So he learned pretty early how to hit from both sides of the plate, which of course would be much more useful later on. He grew up playing sandlot-style baseball, just like most kids who grew up in his era. And he also played football, but he had to quit that due to an injury that he had, which ultimately led to
Osteomyelitis.
Thank you, Chris. I couldn't pronounce that, but it eventually led to a potential fatal bone disease. So he quit football, obviously. The first doctor actually said his leg needed to be amputated, but there was a second recommendation of 8 shots of penicillin a day. And he was able to keep his leg, thankfully, while playing baseball. I bet you didn't know, Mickey Mantle almost didn't even have a leg before he even got to the majors. He almost lost it on the way there. He played semi-pro ball on the Baxter Springs, and a Yankee scout named Tom Greenwade came to look at Mickey's team. He looked at the third baseman, actually, and Mickey hit 2 long home runs, one of them left-handed and one of them right-handed, and Greenwade offered him a contract that would have to wait until after he graduated high school, but he signed a $1,100 bonus and a $400 salary for the rest of the 1949 season.
So now Mickey Mantle is a professional, starting out low in the minor leagues, and he's in the Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri League, the KOM League. In that 1949 season, he hits .313 with a .467 slugging percentage. Then he goes up minor league level in 1950, and he does even better. In 1950, hit .383 with a .638 slugging percentage in those minor leagues, and obviously that made an impression on the New York Yankees major league club. Casey Stengel definitely wanted that bat in the lineup. And in spring training of 1951, they're pretty much determining that Mantle is going to be a starter that season at the age of 19. And he was given the number 6. There was a lot of hype behind Mickey Mantle. It was Ruth. It was Ruth wearing number 3. Then it was Gehrig wearing number 4. Then it was Joe DiMaggio, who was wearing number 5, entering his final season. So he was given number 6, kind of implying that he was going to be the next Yankee great. And then, Casey Stengel was extremely impressed. He finally got to see him live outside of, like batting practice and stuff. And he was quoted as saying in spring training, quote, "He has more speed than any slugger I've seen and more slug than any speedster. And nobody has ever had more of both of them together. This kid ain't logical. He's too good. It's very confusing." So that leads to
But that is such a great quote. Like, this guy doesn't make sense. He's not supposed to be this good. Like, this is not normal.
Yeah, and based on what he was able to do, that statement kind of makes sense as well.
And by the way, it's a miracle that he even has a leg.
Yeah. And he's, making this type of impression. That's totally correct. So he makes his debut on opening day of 1951. That's at Yankee Stadium, and he's playing right field next to Joe DiMaggio. I mean, this kid's a 19-year-old kid from Oklahoma, and he's living out pretty much everyone's dream. And through May 18th, he's doing pretty well. Through May 18th, he has a .316 batting average and an .872 OPS. Definitely a guy who was very important in that lineup. And then he starts to slump a little bit. He starts to slump for over a month, from May 20th to June 26th. He hits .214 with a .659 OPS, and that results in him having to take a seat on the bench and basically be a backup pinch hitter, kind of platoon guy for the next couple weeks. And in that role, he went 3 for 15. And then he gets sent down to AAA. And then in AAA, it gets even worse. He goes 3 for 18 in AAA. and everything is just falling apart for Mickey Mantle, this 19-year-old kid from Oklahoma. And he calls his father, and he says, maybe it's just an emotional thing, but he says he wants to stop playing and he wants to go home. And luckily for Mickey, he was playing minor league baseball in Kansas City, which is very close to Oklahoma, relatively, like in the country. And his father drove from Oklahoma to Kansas City and actually confronted Mickey at his hotel room. And Mickey kind of reiterated these feelings, and he said, he wants to quit. He wants to quit. He doesn't want to play baseball. Maybe go back to the mines of Oklahoma. And his father said, quote, "Now you shut up. I don't want to hear your whining. I thought I raised a man, not a coward." And after the incident, Mickey, without anybody there, he broke down crying, and then he called his father and said he was going to give it another go. Very good idea on Mickey's part. And for the rest of his season at AAA, he goes ahead and hits .385 with 11 home runs in less than 40 games. I mean, that's like a 50 home run pace if
Not
you put
bad.
that over a full season.
Yeah.
And then he gets called back up to the majors. They figure, all right, he's right at his wrongs. And they don't assign him the number 6 again. They assign him the number 7, which was probably a great deal of relief to Mickey Mantle. He didn't want to really be put on
A
that.
little bit of less pressure for sure.
Yeah, a little less pressure. And he was, as a 19-year-old kid, you don't want that sentiment around you. And after he gets called back up, slashes .284, .370, .495 for an .865 OPS for the rest of that season. And the Yankees, of course, it's the Yankees in the 50s, so they're going to go to the World Series. That's just something that is going to happen. So they go to the World Series, and then in Game 2, there's a fly ball to center, and Mickey's running after it. And sort of near the last second, Joe DiMaggio calls him off. So Mickey Mantle stops very suddenly, and then he gets a cleat caught in a rubber drain cover. And, it looks like he just got shot. His knee is completely torn up, and he definitely can't play for the rest of the World Series. He has to watch the rest of the World Series from the hospital. But then on his way to the hospital, or on his way to the taxi heading to the hospital, his father was trying to help him into a taxi, and Mickey put his full weight on his father, and his father actually fell to the ground, and both of them actually had to go into the emergency room and get checked out. And Mickey obviously gets diagnosed with torn ligaments in his knee, but even more severely, his father gets diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. And they watch the rest of the World Series together. The Yankees win that one. Mickey Mantle ended up getting surgery on his knee. But unfortunately, his father died from Hodgkin's disease soon after diagnosis at the age of 39. And, Mickey believed in the Mantle curse. The Mantle curse was, in his family, just a history of at least the patriarchal members dying very young. His grandfather died before the age of 40. 2 of his uncles died before the age of 40, and obviously his father had just died before the age of 40. And that belief for Mickey that he was going to die young kind of led to some self-destructive behavior, because, if you feel like, your life expectancy isn't that high, you're probably going to put yourself more at risk. And, that's something that was more recognized off the field and might have carried over on the field.
I don't think a lot of people realize like how tough Mickey's personal life outside of baseball was. I mean, losing your father like that when he's trying to help you recover from a little injury like that, like that's something that's never gonna go away. And also, believing like you're cursed out of the fact that everyone else in your family dies young, so it very well could happen to you too. Like that's honestly that is something, especially in that sort of era, that can really like stick with you and stay in your mind at a lot of times.
But yeah, 1951 was a real rocky road for Mr. Mantle over there.
1952, however, was a lot more pleasant to him. He made the move to center field and actually led the league with a 924 OPS. He finished second in the American League in wins above replacement and third in the MVP voting. He hit 345 with a 1061 OPS in the World Series. Obviously, he contributed a lot to the Yankees World Series run, including the go-ahead home run in the 6th inning of Game 7. Chris, I believe you have that clip.
Yep. Yeah.
Right, let's see it.
Definitely an interesting broadcast setup. They actually have they have 2 full 1952 World Series games on YouTube. Pretty crazy.
It's crazy.
There's a fly ball out to right field. And the Yankees are back out in front, 3-2 in the battle of the home runs. And there's Chuck Gressel over the water cooler.
I gotta tell you, I kind of wish there was still like one 1950s baseball stadium still up, not for like people to play in it, but just for people to like go visit and be like, this is what it all looked like back in the 1950s.
Oh, the dimensions are hilarious.
Like they all got torn down, I assume, but I really hope there's just one still out there, just for viewing purposes. I don't think it's true though. Also, the next inning he got an insurance RBI to strengthen the Yankees' lead, and eventually they would go on to win the World Series.
And Walken then got the next 2 men. Left-hand batters. There's a liner to left center for base hit. Third. Score as Snyder's throw goes into Reese. The magnificent Mickey, just 20 years old, driving in his 2nd run, his 5th in the series, and his 10th base hit.
That's got to be Ebbets Field, right? It has to be.
Yeah, that's Ebbets Field in Brooklyn.
Okay. That one's definitely not still up. There's no room for it in Brooklyn, but I mean, I'm sure. I really hope there's just one up there. And like the announcer said, like 20 years old, already contributing big time for the Yankees in the World Series.
He was the original Juan Soto.
Yes. In 1953, he had an 895 OPS, which ranked 5th in the American League. Also, his wins above replacement was 3rd in the AL. And he hit his most famous regular season home run that season. So, according to the Society of American Baseball Research, the Senators' home park was decidedly pitcher-friendly. The left field foul pole was 405 feet down the line. That's a big center field in today's game. And behind that wall was a grandstand that extended 65 feet until it reached a massive sign advertising National Bohemian Beer, which prominently featured one-eyed, mustached face of Mr. Bo. And he was the mascot for the brew. And batting right-handed, Mantle drove Staub's second pitch high and long and incredibly fast. The sphere easily cleared the left center field fence and blew past a 55-foot Mr. Bo sign, clipping off his mustache and continuing its flight over the rooftops of the houses across neighboring 5th Street. Estimating lengths were between 540 and 565 feet. So there's a rumor, I guess similar to the famous Babe Ruth called shot. Did Mickey Mantle really hit a home run between 540 and 565? What does the StatCast say? What do we got on that?
Yeah, I'm not
It's had
trusting
tests.
anything until we got that launch angle.
Yeah. Do we
And-
have the exit velocity? Do we have the apex?
Yeah, if he hit that if he hit that like 550 feet, exit velocity has got to be like 130.
125.
Yeah, it's wild.
Also, the Yankees were back in the World Series, and Mickey drove in 7 runs in a 6-game World Series win, 4 of which came on a grand slam in Game 5, which obviously propelled the Yankees to victory on that day.
Yeah, he comes up. It was a tie series, I believe, at the time, so it was very important.
I want to know how they got that first camera angle, like of his face.
Wallops Meyer's first pitch for a grand slam home run into the upper left field stand, making the score Yankees 6, Dodgers 1.
That one was filmed like it wasn't live. That was a weird
I was
one.
just saying, like that first camera angle of his face, there's no way they just had like a camera in the ground zoomed up on him in 1953.
Yeah.
In 1954, not much to it other than he had a 933 OPS, which ranked third in the AL. His WAR ranked fourth.
And then we take this over to prime Mickey Mantle. Prime Mickey Mantle is something to admire for sure. You know, he was the American League's Willie Mays, you know, as a, for lack of a better term, best center fielder of the American League for sure, best player of the American League during this time frame, talking mostly between 1955 and 1962. In 1955, he's just getting cooking. He has a league-leading 37 home runs, leads the league in home runs for the first time in his career, has a 1042 OPS, which also leads the league, and a 9.5 wins above replacement, which also leads the league. And didn't get really much MVP love for whatever reason, but also a hamstring pull kind of limited him in the fourth World Series he was trying to play in. Only played 3 games in that World Series, and he went 2 for 10. That was of course where the Yankees lost to the Dodgers actually in the World Series. Didn't happen a lot, but it happened in 1955. And then in 1956, Mickey Mantle probably has his best season ever. He wins the Triple Crown, bats .353 with 52 home runs and 130 RBIs. And he's the only Triple Crown winner ever. I believe there's, 17 Triple Crown winners ever. He's the only one of those to hit over 350 with 50-plus home runs. Also, he is one of 2 men to hit over 350, hit over 50 home runs, and have a wins above replacement of 11 or more in a single season. And that other man, Babe Ruth, number 3 on the Yankees back in the 20s and 30s. And also that 1956 season, the only season since 1933, only season since, all the way back then, no one's done it since, only season since 1933 with a 350-plus average and 50-plus home runs. And he is, also that season was definitely big for his wins above replacement. Obviously had over 11 wins above replacement. Only 6 men have had seasons with a higher Fangraphs WAR. And those 6 men are Rogers Hornsby, Honus Wagner, Lou Gehrig, Ted Williams, Barry Bonds, and Babe Ruth. And probably part of the reason why he had such a high Fangraphs WAR is because of what he was able to do with runners in scoring position. He hit .444 with runners in scoring position, which is absolutely
Unheard
crazy.
of. Unheard of.
Unheard of. You don't see that a lot. In fact, a player had not hit that well with runners in scoring position, minimum 150 plate appearances with runners in scoring position, since 1929. It had been 27 years since anyone had done that. And then no one would do that well again until George Brett hit 469 with runners in scoring position in 1980. So that was the best season with runners in scoring position in a 50-year span. Very good stuff from Mickey Mantle. And, of course, he leads the league in OPS, and he leads the league in wins above replacement, and wins his first most valuable player. And it didn't stop there. He was, very good in the World Series. He actually hit a go-ahead home run, but that home run was not the most memorable part. That home run was not the most memorable part of the game, and he was not the most memorable performer of that game, for sure. And in Game 5, Don Larson is on the mound, and he's got something going. Let's see if he can keep it going.
There's a drive to left center. Mantle digging hard. Still going. Great catch.
So he ranges out and makes that great catch to save that perfect game, only perfect game in playoff history. And ultimately in that series, he hit 3 home runs with a 1067 OPS, and the Yankees ended up winning that World Series thanks to performances like Mickey's.
That's right. And in 1957, he actually had a better batting average and a better OBP and a better OPS. 365 average, 512 OBP, 1177 OPS, but he actually didn't lead any of those categories, believe it or not. He stole a career-high 16 bases and had a career-high 11.3 WAR, which led the league, and he won MVP again. By the way, I checked this last week, and 1956 and 57, Mickey Mantle, the only non-exclusively left-handed hitter to ever have 2 consecutive 11 WAR seasons.
Yeah.
Everyone else who did that was like Barry Bonds, Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, exclusively left-handed.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Mickey Mantle. Obviously, he was partially left-handed, but switch hitting.
Yeah.
In 58, he once again set a career high in stolen bases with 18. He beat his previous high by 2. He led the league in home runs with 42. He also led walks, runs, and he finished second in OPS with a 1035. And he led the league once again in wins above replacement. And he finished 5th in the MVP voting. But he had 1,003 OPS in the 7-game World Series victory once again for the Yankees. And in 59, a career high 21 stolen bases. He just keeps getting better. Finishes second in OPS with a 904. He leads the league once again in wins above replacement. And in the 50s, Mantle led runs and in WAR. He led all of baseball in runs scored and wins above replacement. And he was the face of 1950s baseball. I mean, you're on the Yankees, you're the best player, you're leading the whole world in everything. Of course, you're going to be the face of baseball.
Yeah, he was big time, and I guess I guess it's bittersweet because of the because of the pipe drain incident. He couldn't go into military service because of bad knees, so he could play in 1952 and 1953, unlike like Willie Mays and even Ted Williams.
Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah, DiMaggio retired after 51.
He did go into the war though.
Yeah, DiMaggio. Yeah, he went into the war.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Mantle was able to kind of keep that excellence in Major League Baseball. And, we talked about it last week, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, just, post World War II, New York baseball was at its peak until the Dodgers and Giants actually moved west. But it was a great short period of baseball. And after that 1959 season where, he leads the league in wins above replacement again, in 1960, he leads the league in OPS back in his rightful place, has a 957 OPS and also leads the league in home runs with 40, but finished second in the MVP vote behind Roger Maris, who, that wouldn't be Roger Maris's best season actually. And in 1960, it was an absolutely absurd World Series. Mickey Mantle hit 400 with a 1345 OPS in that World Series. Also had 3 home runs and 11 RBI. The Yankees outscored the Pirates 55-27 in that World Series and lost the World Series.
They still lost. Yeah, because they lost to Clemente.
Yeah, they lost to Clemente, Mazeroski, Dick Grote, and they blew out all their wins and they lost all their losses in very close fashion.
1-run games, 2-run games.
Yeah, it was a tough time there. Pirates kind of get a miracle victory there. That leads to 1961. 1961, even with 1956, it might be Mickey Mantle's most famous season just because of what it represented and his home run count. So prior to 1961, the home run record was being talked about, especially prior to the season, because 8 games were added to the schedule. It went from 154 games to 162 games, and 2 teams were added to each league. So the talent was spread out a little more. Each team was a little worse. Their pitching staffs weren't as deep. So offense would probably, individual offense would probably go up a little more for guys like Mickey Mantle and teammate Roger Maris. So Mantle wasn't really on pace for Ruth's record early on. Ruth's record was 60 at the time, for those who are unaware. Through June 20th, Mickey Mantle had 20 home runs. That's on pace for 51. Meanwhile, next to him in right field was Roger Maris, who had 26 home runs through June 20th, and he was on pace for 66, which obviously would break the record. And then through July 26th, Mickey Mantle goes on an absolute power surge. He hits like 19 home runs in like 33 games. It was absolutely insane from him.
It was crazy.
And Mantle is pretty much caught up to Roger Maris through July 26th. Mantle has 39 home runs. Maris has 40. Maris is on pace for 67. Mantle is on pace for 65. So they would both break Ruth's record. It would just be about who got there first and who ended up with more. And Mantle he kind of plays like a normal player for the next month or so, only gets 7 more home runs. And through August 29th, Mantle only has 46 home runs and he's on pace for 57. Meanwhile, Maris has 51 home runs and is on pace for 63. And then through September 19th, the record isn't looking good for Mickey Mantle. He would need, through September 19th, he had 53 home runs and would need 8 home runs in 9 games to break the record. Meanwhile, Maris had 58 home runs and would need 3 home runs in 9 games, which was exactly pretty much the pace he was going anyway. And Mantle was pretty hurt. Mantle was pretty hurt throughout his career, and he was playing through injuries, so he stayed off the field for a few days. Then he came back on September 23rd, and he actually re-aggravated his previous injury, and he had to get a hip wound drained. There was something in his hip that had to be drained, and something that was like the size of a golf ball. I'm no scientist, but it sounds pretty disgusting actually. And he ended up missing most of the rest of the season. And in that season, he actually led, despite losing the MVP to Roger Maris, who won it because he broke Ruth's record with 61 home runs. Mantle led the American League in wins above replacement again, and was second in OPS, not to Roger Maris, but to Detroit Tigers player named Norm Cash, and finished second in the MVP there. And Mantle was only able to play in 2 of the 5 World Series games that the Yankees played that year, but the Yankees didn't really need him. They actually won in that series. That leads to 1962, where he kind of closes out his prime. He still is missing games due to injury. He misses actually 39 games due to injuries in 1962, but pitchers are really afraid to throw to him. He had a 24.3% walk rate.
Which is ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And he is one of 5 men to do that in a single season, minimum 500 plate appearances. He had almost a walk per game. 24.3% walk rate is crazy stuff from Mantle. And in that season, he was second in the American League in WAR and had a league-leading 1091 OPS. And he gets his 3rd most valuable player award finally. He probably deserved, 1 or 2 more between 57 and 62. But
At least he didn't get jobbed like Willie Mays did.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 1962 was
Yikes.
Yikesville for the writers in the National League for sure. But I think they got it right over on the American League side. Mantle led the league in OPS with 1091, and he wins that MVP in 1962. Didn't have a great World Series though, but the Yankees won anyway because they're the Yankees. They win World Series. And that season, that 1962 season, that caps an all-time 8-year stretch between 55 and 62. It was all Mickey Mantle. He led all players in home runs, runs scored, walks, and most importantly, the god of all stats, wins above replacement, more than anybody, more than Mays, more than Hank Aaron, more than Frank Robinson, more than Roberto Clemente, more than everyone. And from 55 to 62, minimum 3,000 plate appearances, which is about 375 per season. He led in on-base percentage with 445. That on-base percentage was 40 points better than anyone else. And he led in slugging percentage with a .616 slugging percentage. That was 21 points better than anybody else. And he led in OPS with a 1062 OPS over an 8-year stretch, led in that category by 75 points.
That's absolute. 75 difference of points in OPS is night and day.
He was on another.
Like it is very noticeable when someone has 75 points of OPS difference.
Yeah, especially when you're considering an 8-year stretch. I mean, over 1,000 games played by everybody, and still able to maintain a 75-point difference between him and the rest of the field. And he, in that 55 to 62 stretch, he led the American League in wins above replacement 6 out of those 8 years, and like I said, won 3 MVPs. He also averaged 40 home runs, 119 runs scored, and 119 walks per year in that stretch. And of all, this is all through his age 30 season. After 1962, he's still only 30 years old. And of all position players in Major League Baseball, his 91.1 Fangraphs WAR through his age 30 season is 3rd all time behind Ty Cobb and Rogers Hornsby. Mantle was getting it done, and he was getting it done early.
He was on a pace to be the greatest player of all time.
Probably.
Unfortunately, injury did set him back, which sort of prevented that. But it did set up for a nice little comeback in 1963 because of breaking a bone in his foot after crashing into the wall and getting his foot caught in the fence. Freak accident, but he only played 65 games that season because of it. But nonetheless, he finished that season, shortened season for him, with a 1063 OPS, which was 152 points above the AL leaders among qualifiers. He had a 521 OPS in the World Series. The Yankees did end up getting swept in that series, I believe. And his
Yes.
OPS was actually above average for the team that series. I mean, dry spell offensively for New York there, but Mantle a part of that, but somewhat better than everyone else, shockingly enough. In 1964, he led the league right back with a 10-15 OPS like he never left, but somehow he failed to crack the top 10 in WAR for the first time, other than 1963, of course, since his rookie year because of bad defense, unfortunately. And he got moved out of center field in the last month of that season, and he hit a walk-off home run in Game 3 to give the Yankees a 2-1 series lead in the World Series, but the Yankees ended up losing. But Mantle slashed 333, 467, 792 with a 1258 OPS and 3 home runs with 8 RBIs. So can't blame Mickey Mantle for the Yankees not winning the 64 series. And then he has a smooth fade out. In 1965, the team actually goes under 500 for the first time in 40 years. The team averaged 75.5 wins from 65 to 68, which is kind of a purgatory for the Yankee baseball organization. And they never finished above fifth out of the 10 AL teams that in those years. And Mantle switched to first base in 67. Speaking of 67, on May 14th, Mickey Mantle joined the 500 home run club. Chris, you have the clip of him joining the club, I assume?
Yes.
All right, let's see it.
He was definitely, and he hit this mark at the age of 34?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people are able to do that, really. Most guys hit it a lot later.
David
And
Ortiz
here he
did it at
is.
39.
Here he is. Also, with the trot, you can see the type of pain he was in regularly, just based on his trot. But here's number 500.
Yankees go on the road, won't be back until Memorial Day. May the 30th, doubleheader against the Minnesota Twins. First game at 1. Here's the payoff pitch. This is it. There it goes. It's out of here.
Gotta love the random kids just running on the field.
Yeah, that's how you know it's anywhere between the 50s
Yeah.
and 70s.
I mean, the ultimate highlight for that is just watching Hank Aaron break Babe Ruth's all-time home run record. There's just everyone coming out of the stands.
It was literally one guy just shook his hand and said good job.
Yeah.
It's funny footage, actually.
So Mantle averaged a 386 OBP and an 836 OPS, still very good, and a 149 OPS plus with a 149 weighted runs created plus with 86 walks per year during that 4-year stretch. Still very, very good for his fade out. And Mantle was fourth in all of MLB in walks during that time, and he ended up retiring on March 1st, 1969, after a year where he ranked fourth on the Yankees in WAR. So he was still very good when he retired, but ultimately he decided that enough was enough, and injuries sort of just kept him from continuing on, unfortunately.
Yeah, and he gets his praise pretty much immediately. In 1969, the year that he retired, he had his number retired. On June 8th, Yankee Stadium hosted Mickey Mantle Day, and that was a very special moment for him. In 1974, he gets inducted into the Hall of Fame at 88.2%. His post life was very, very interesting. Had a lot of ups, had a lot of downs. He started a few businesses, restaurants. He also ended up making money in just distributing memorabilia, mostly his own memorabilia. Made money, signing autographs ultimately. And he kind of had to overcome his own habits that evolved from, his belief in a Mantle curse, his belief, or, also his, New York City post-World War II lifestyle that was, party centric, going out for, long nights of drinking and then hitting 2 home runs the next day. But, it caught up to him, and he actually had to go, he actually went to rehab after his own son actually checked himself in. And, he kind of became a better person, but just better as a person after getting sober. He didn't have the greatest resume as a person, in the late 1970s or the 1980s. He was still a bit of an alcoholic and didn't have the best reputation, among his family or even just the general public. But he sobers up, people start to like him more, just becomes better overall as a person. But unfortunately, that aura of him, that him being able to kind of right those wrongs, it lived short. He actually had to get a liver transplant, and after he got the liver transplant, or during the liver transplant, he was diagnosed with liver cancer, and it was a very severe strain of liver cancer, and he died within a year. Died on August 13th, 1995, at the age of 63. But he died after being able to right a lot of wrongs, with his family, with the general public, and not a lot of people are able to do that. Which I guess that's a silver lining on his life in general. But back to mostly his life as a baseball player. I mean, obviously, he has one of the greatest resumes of all time. You can tout him, as of now, probably the second greatest center fielder of all time. He is 18th all time in home runs with 536, and he is 16th all time in position player baseball reference WAR, 14th all time in position player Fangraphs WAR, 6th all time in OPS plus with 172 minimum 6,000 plate appearances, and 6th all time also in weighted runs created plus with 170, also minimum 6,000 plate appearances. Mike Trout kind of messed up that stat there. And he was also, he was in 12 World Series. 12 World Series. So he definitely had his resume in the Fall Classic as well. He appeared 12 times. He won 7 of those times. He has the second most amount of World Series games ever behind Yogi Berra, second most at-bats, second most plate appearances. But he leads all time in runs scored, leads all time in the World Series in home runs, also runs batted in, and he leads all time in World Series walks to go with all of that. And overall in the World Series had a 908 OPS, so there wasn't really much of a difference between
He was fine.
between regular season Mickey and postseason Mickey. And, you also have to think about how he kind of affected culture, or how the culture affected him. He was a representative of, baseball, first of all. Then he was a representative of New York culture. And he was also kind of a representative of American culture, which, you could rope that in all in the same. He was, all 3 of those things, he really hit it on the head. And he was kind of a unique story because he had the humble beginnings of an Oklahoma boy, but he still embraced that New York scene, that post-Depression, post-World War II New York scene where, things are good again. You can go out partying. It's almost like the 1920s again. And he fully embraced that. Being a Yankee in the 1950s was probably an insane lifestyle, and he definitely lived up to it both on the field and off the field. He would perform at an elite level after, long nights of drinking, and, also, not even drinking, not even being physically drained from that. He was hurt a lot. He had a lot of ailments. The knee thing with the pipe drain definitely hurt him at the beginning. That probably limited his base running and defense, but he was still able to do a lot there. But, you know, at least at the end of his career too, every swing seemed to have a grimace on it. And, you know, he probably wasn't at his full potential. You know, it's a unique situation with Mickey Mantle because, like I said, he's probably the second best center fielder of all time behind Willie Mays, but there's still an idea of what could have been. You can't say that a lot with a lot of
Already Hall of Fame caliber players.
Yeah, you can't, like with Hall of Fame players generally they've maxed out their potential. You know, Willie Mays was everything Willie Mays could have been. Same thing with Babe Ruth. You know, you look at our guys. I mean, I think Albert Pujols is maximizing what he could be.
Miguel Cabrera.
I think, you know, if you just go down our list, like George Brett, Joe Morgan,
yeah, Roberto
Paul
Clemente.
Molitor, they all kind of maxed out their level. And Mickey Mantle had 536 career home runs, 14th all-time in position player Fangraphs WAR. But there's still like an idea of what could have been. Could it, if he didn't have those injuries, if he didn't have that lifestyle, could he have been a Babe Ruth type? Would we be putting him, you know, up? Would there be a legit comparison between him and Mays, you know, career-wise? Where would he be on the home run list? So, you know, that's kind of what makes Mickey Mantle's career unique. Just the whole lifestyle, the whole bravado, while still being one of the greatest baseball players of all time. And that kind of closes the book.
I'd like to say a few things real quick. I
Go
mean,
right ahead,
you kind of
please.
hit the nail on the head, Chris, with talking about how he didn't exactly maximize his potential. And the point that I was going to sort of lead into, which you implied, was that Mickey Mantle, in a way, was sort of underrated. Like, I mean, when you talk about the all-time baseball players, especially in that era, you automatically look towards Willie Mays, guys like Hank Aaron, guys like even Clemente. And not that Mickey Mantle is necessarily not thought about at all. He's definitely in those conversations as well. But he could have been like a clear number one among all those guys had he stayed healthy. And, you know, there's a lot of ways to look at his career. I mean, you certainly think about the what if he was healthy the whole time. But, like, let's not forget, he could have had his leg amputated and he could have quit baseball when he was 20 years old in the minors, but his dad didn't let him. Like, this could have never happened at all, just as well as it could have happened even more.
Yeah, that's correct there. So yeah, definitely a unique story. You know, a good story. The Oklahoma boy who becomes one of the great New York Yankees.
A lot of people look at at Mickey Mantle as like, you know, this guy who's an idiot and he drank himself out of baseball. And that's not necessarily true. Like, a lot of people didn't really understand the stuff he went through in his personal life and how close he was to not being able to play baseball at all once he even was able to get to that major league level. And I feel like his personal life is very misunderstood. And I'm glad we sort of talked about this to really open up that to the people. But nonetheless, like, one of the best players of all time, very much could have been better, but very much couldn't have been there at all at the same time.
Yeah, those are all good points you bring up there. And yeah, that kind of closes the book on our Mickey Mantle portion of the episode. We will be right back talking about the 2001 World Series champion Arizona Diamondbacks. We'll be right back. And we're back for the second half of the episode where we're talking about the 2001 Arizona Diamondbacks, who won the World Series in their fourth year. Crazy stuff. Daniel Curran set up exactly what was going on with that young franchise.
So like you mentioned, Chris, they were an infant of a franchise, their fourth year of existence. Actually, in 1999, they had a 100-win season, went to the playoffs, and lost in the first round to the New York Mets. And in their third year, in 2000, they had an 85-77 record, which was third in the NL West. And Buck Showalter, their manager, got booted out after a 85-77 run on a third-year team. You know, without context, you'd think like that they're in really good shape, but in reality, that's a down year for them. So Bob Brenly, a rookie manager, comes in to help out this young team. And they also signed Mark Grace to be their first baseman out of free agency. And he had the 20th best OBP in the league over the last 4 seasons. So obviously a nice pickup at first there for the Snakes. They also signed Reggie Sanders to be the left fielder who was coming off a down year. So, a bit of a buy low, low risk, high reward situation. So this would normally be the part where I talk about how the team started in the regular season, but it would be wrong of me to do that with this team because on March 24th, during a spring training game, I'm sure most of you might know what I'm talking about. Randy Johnson did something like a 1 in a million thing that you're probably never going to see again. This clip has been played so many times, I'm sure you've all seen it. Chris, why don't you go ahead and show the people what exactly happened on this March 24th date?
I don't know if there's any sound on this.
There
but
is.
There's visual.
Look at it in slow motion.
Here.
Wait for it. Bam!
Oh my God. Hearing the crowd on that was hilarious. I've never heard it with the crowd.
I hadn't either before I put that in this week. So, of course, I mean, that has nothing to do with the season really at all. That could have happened to anyone, but that happened that year, and I couldn't just ignore it. So, anyway, it was a bit of a dry start in the desert. The Diamondbacks had a 4-8 record in their first 12 games. I know that's not, much of a big sample size, but it was the worst record in the NL, or tied for it at least. And one of the main culprits was actually Randy Johnson. He had a 6.41 ERA in his first 3 starts with a 2.88 average and an 8.53 OPS against in 19.2 innings pitched.
And yeah, it starts out pretty bad for them. Their Bob Brenly's stint isn't looking great.
Yeah.
Then
making Buck Showalter firing making look real bad.
Yeah, first impressions are everything, and Bob Brenly certainly did not have a great first impression through those first 12 games, but he turns it around. Him and the rest of the club turn it around. They go 47-28 from April 15th through the end of the first half, the All-Star break. From April 16th through April 22nd,
Right after the 4-8 start.
Yeah, right after that 4-8 start, Reggie Sanders just turned it on. He slashed 421, 500, 1421 for a 1921 OPS during that week. Had 8 hits, 6 home runs, and a double. And those statistics obviously win him Player of the Week honors. And Luis Gonzalez, who's one of their better hitters to begin with, hits 13 home runs in the month of April, and that tied Ken Griffey Jr. for the most home runs in April in MLB history. And in that month of April, had an 804 slugging percentage for that month.
That's right. So on May 8th of that year, Randy Johnson became the third pitcher, but the 4th time it happened, to pitch a 20 strikeout game. Of course, it would be done by Roger Clemens twice and Kerry Wood before Randy. But against the Cincinnati Reds on that May 8th night, he was just about untouchable. Chris, you have a clip. Let's see it.
We'd talk over it.
No, we could just let Randy do the talking.
Six strikeouts, and he's all by himself now, 11 all time. Swing and a miss, and the ball gets away from Miller, and Saller doesn't even bother to run down to first base. Swing and a miss by Castro. Drops him out, and the bat goes flying all the way down the run. To the third base goes Johnson. Fans See you later. 12 strikeout a game by Johnson. And struck him out for the third straight time. 1-2 on Ochoa. See you later. Slider in the dirt. Moves away from Miller. And he'll throw on down to Grace. Randy Johnson with 14 strikeouts. Adios. And there it is. 17 strikeouts for Johnson. 18 for Johnson. What's he done? But none would be bigger than number 20 here tonight. 2-2 to Castro. Randy Johnson has tied the major league record for strikeouts in a 9-inning game. 20 for the big unit.
So 20 strikeouts over 9 innings. That means there were 7 batters that got out on anything that wasn't a strikeout, which is incredibly impressive. Randy had a game score of 97 for that game with a line of 9 innings pitched, 3 hits, 1 run, 0 walks, and of course 20 strikeouts. So for those of you that don't know what average game score is, it is a statistic created by the one and only Bill James. If you don't know who he is, look him up. Every pitcher starts a game with 50 points. You add 1 point for each out recorded. So essentially that means 3 points for every complete inning pitched. You add 2 points for each inning they complete after the 4th. Add 1 point for each strikeout. Subtract 2 points for each hit allowed. Subtract 4 points for each earned run allowed. Subtract 2 points for each unearned run allowed. And subtract 1 point for each walk. So obviously this is a stat that heavily depends on. It's good on high strikeout games like this. His game score was 97, which is at that point in time was the best game score in D-backs history. And today there are 4 games in D-backs history with a game score of 97. 3 of them were by RJ, and 1 of them was by Schilling. However, Randy Johnson actually didn't get a decision in this game. It was a 1-1 tie game after the 9th, and Randy didn't come back out for the 10th. But the D-backs actually went into the 10th, and they losing 3-1. And in the bottom of the 10th, Mark Grace hit a 2-run double to tie the game, followed by a Matt Williams RBI walk. And that is how the Diamondbacks won on May 8th.
And speaking of extra inning games, the D-backs played their longest game exactly 3 weeks later in the city of San Francisco at AT&T Park. And it was the longest game in franchise history. And Arubio Durazo in the 18th with a Brandon Belt-esque RBI double instead of a home run.
18th inning as a road player, though.
18th inning by both, or actually, Belts was in Washington, not in San Francisco, but had a San Francisco influence. And he comes up in the 18th inning with a man on base.
Just choked off a yawn, almost choked myself. Runner goes down the left field line. Bonds on the move, still on the move, and it's a fair ball. Bonds gets it into the infield. Finley scores, and there's the first run of the game, and it comes here in the 18th. And we are not surprised that it's Durazo who knocks it in.
So that gives them their victory in their longest game in their history. And is that still their longest game in MLB or in franchise history?
It might be. I believe so.
What also made that game special is they took sole position of first place in the National League West, and manager Bob Brenly actually said in the 15th inning that if the Diamondbacks won that game, he'd let them skip infield practice for the rest of the year. And they never actually took infield, I guess, as a team for the rest of the year.
And that's something I love about Bob Brenly is 2 months into managing this team as a rookie manager, never done it before. He's already put that much trust into his players that he's like, you know what, you guys don't even have to come out for the rest of the year. It's only been 2 months and there's 4 to go, minus the postseason. But yeah, no, don't bother showing up for infield. You guys are fine.
Yeah, and didn't really hurt them in the end. Then on June 8th, Luis Gonzalez has a performance for the ages in Kansas City at Kauffman Stadium.
Gonzo gets one into left field, pretty well hit. Back goes the left fielder Quinn at the wall. He leaps. It's gone for a home run. Gonzalez has hit his 23rd of the season, and the Diamondbacks sprint on top here with the first inning run.
I'll tell you, there's been some balls hit this first inning. The great catch by Dye on the ball hit by Womack. Bell hit line one foul, just barely foul. And now Gonzalez goes to the opposite field. That ball just seemed to carry.
Been down. Gonzalez deep to right. If it stays fair, it's gone. It's a home run for Luis Gonzalez, the second of the night. First base umpire Bill Wilkie got a good look at it. You see Bird's upset. Home plate umpire telling Bird it was fair. Gonzalez has homered twice tonight, and the Diamondbacks laid in 3-0. Sacrifice fly on a wild pitch. Gonzalez a fly ball to pretty deep center. Way back at the warning track, at the wall. He's got a 3-homer game, Luis Gonzalez. That's number 25. What a night for Gonzo. I asked him before the game how do you like this ballpark. He says, I like it. I guess he loves it now.
Well, watch his bench. His bench is really going to react to this. He'll be all grins.
25 home runs, 3 in the game tonight.
Huge day for Mr. Gonzalez. And he became the second Diamondbacks player in their history to have a 3-home run game. Steve Finley did that on September 8th of the 1999 season. And both of those games happened, little coincidence. Both of those 3-home run games happened on the 8th day of the month. So,
Just a little coincidence.
A little
That makes me
coincidence.
think. Another cool moment that happened with this team on June 17th, Father's Day. Tony Womack, the shortstop of the team, hit a grand slam and got emotional rounding the bases after he had lost his father just 2 months earlier. Chris, we have a clip for that. Why don't you go ahead and play it? So obviously Tony Womack, after losing his father, hits the grand slam for him on Father's Day. And Womack also hit 2 doubles that day. And I did some digging, and this was one of 2 games in Tony Womack's career where he had 3 extra base hits. The other one came on August 9th, 1997, and he had 3 doubles, no home runs, no triples whatsoever. This, of course, he has a grand slam and 2 doubles. So this ended up being the best offensive game of Tony Womack's entire career on Father's Day after losing his father. Very timely, and it's really cool to see something like that.
Very cool.
So now we're into the All-Star break. Luis Gonzalez, Randy Johnson, and Kurt Schilling are the guys representing the Diamondbacks. No surprises there. Gonzalez, a 355 average, 443, 745, 1189 slash line with 35 home runs and 86 RBI. 35 home runs is really good for an entire season. That's him at the All-Star break with 86 RBI as well. Randy Johnson, a 2.71 ERA and 202 strikeouts, already at the 200 mark in mid-July, and 132 innings pitched. And Kurt Schilling, a 3.20 ERA, 160 strikeouts, and 143 and a third innings pitched. Every single person here has one stat that would be really good for an entire season that they have in mid-July. For Gonzalez, it's home runs. For Johnson, it's strikeouts. For Schilling, already having 143 innings logged by mid-July. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's wild.
Luis Gonzalez beat guys like Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, and Jason Giambi, among others, in the home run derby at Safeco Field that year. And Randy Johnson ended up starting the All-Star game. He went 2 innings pitched, 1 hit, no runs, no walks, and 3 strikeouts. And Luis Gonzalez went 1 for 2 with a single out of the leadoff spot.
Yeah, and that closes the book on the first half for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Kind of end up cruising to the finish line at the end there. Have a relatively good, not spectacular, but relatively good second half, enough to get them into the playoffs. They go 41-34 in that second half, and probably the highlight of that second half was on August 23rd. Randy Johnson going with his yearly routine of getting 300 strikeouts.
Just to stay in shape.
Just to exactly, just to stay in shape. Keep things going.
Like a warm-up round for him.
On August 23rd, he's doing this. And
still a full month left.
So he's got what, 297 strikeouts at this point. And here we are.
Those 3 strikeouts, it will be the first time in Major League history that a pitcher has done that in 4 consecutive seasons.
Slider on the inside corner.
And the way he's going to get 13 tonight.
And there is number 11.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good night action.
Fuller foul at the third base line. I can't make a single mistake as it's 0-2. It's the 0-2 to Matthew. Swing and a miss. And that is the 12th of the game for Randy Johnson. Strike 1 to Jack Wilson. Swing and a miss, and Randy Johnson now ahead 0-2.
That little slide, just look at me over slider on the outside part of the plate.
Johnson fanned a side in the first, 1 in the second, the side in the third, 1 in the fourth, 2 in the fifth, the first 2 in the sixth, and here's the 0-2. And Randy Johnson has become the first pitcher in Major League history to strike out 300 batters in 4 consecutive seasons. And he strikes out the side in the inning on 9 pitches. Wow.
I mean, if there's anything that defines Randy Johnson
I was going to say, is there a more Randy Johnson thing to do?
Yeah, if there's anything that defines Randy Johnson from 1999 to 2002, it's getting your 300th strikeout for a 4th consecutive year on an immaculate inning. How do you do that's? It's laughable. It's crazy.
It doesn't make any sense.
By the way, Randy Johnson, he was one of the most entertaining pitchers to watch, just to see how stupid hitters look. There were probably better pitchers, but I don't think anyone looked more stupid than the batters who faced Randy Johnson. I mean, the swings that came out of them were insane. And Randy Johnson, definitely not the only star of that second half. Tony Womack, as mentioned previously in the episode, he really turned things up in that second half. He hit 327 with a 370 batting average 327 with a 370 on base percentage. 370 on base percentage in that second half, and he became key at the leadoff spot. Really was able to set guys like Luis Gonzalez up very well at the top of the lineup. Also doing that very well was Craig Counsell.
Known for having the best batting stance of all time.
Yeah, one of the great batting stances of all time, and I think he was nicknamed Rudy during the season for kind of the grit
Yeah.
of Craig Counsell. He hit 286 with a 359 on base percentage, and became the everyday second baseman. He didn't start the year that way, but he ended it that way, and definitely became key in the postseason, as we'll get into. And 2001 just riddled all of U.S. sports, mostly baseball and football. Probably baseball the most, just because of where they were in the season, and Major League Baseball, in the wake of the attacks of September 11th, they postponed all their games for a week, and the Diamondbacks finished pretty smoothly with a 92-70 record to win that National League West.
So there were some very notable seasons for the Diamondbacks, particularly some all-time great seasons. Buckle up, folks, as you're about to hear the greatest offensive season to this date, not just in 2001, to this date in the history of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Luis Gonzalez in 2001 hit 325, 429, 688, 1117 for his slash line. Him and Sammy Sosa in 2001 are the only men since 1932 to have a single season with 320 average, 55 plus home runs, and 140 plus RBIs. He hit 346 with a 497 OBP with runners in scoring position. The all-time D-backs single season leader in plate appearances, home runs, RBI, ISO. By the way, his ISO that year, 363. The next best was 284 in the whole history of the Arizona Diamondbacks. His slugging percentage was 688. The next best is 592. In fact, at 592, that was Ketel Marte last year. Luis Gonzalez was still just about 100 slugging points better than him. His OPS was 1117. The next best is 1005. That was 2015 Paul Goldschmidt. His WOBA was 454. He leads that in Diamondbacks all time. Same with weighted runs created plus 173. Also wins above replacement with 8.9. Like I said, the best offensive season in Diamondbacks history. And yet he still finishes third in the MVP vote because this was the year that Barry Bonds hit 73 home runs. So it's not like you can really point fingers. Curt Schilling, he led the league in innings pitched with 256.2. He had 6 complete games, which led the league. His OBP against was 273. His K to walk ratio was 7.51. He was second in ERA with a 298, second in strikeouts with 293. He finished second in the Cy Young vote, and he also won the Roberto Clemente Award. So you got to wonder, he was second in a lot of those stats. Who could possibly have beat him? Well, of course, it was Randy Johnson. He led league WAR for all pitchers. He had a 249 OBP, ERA, which led the league, a 213 FIP, which led the league, an OPS against of 583, 372 strikeouts. His 372 strikeouts in a single season is third all time since 1887, and his 13.41 Ks per 9 leads all National League seasons ever. It is 1 out of 4,907, and he, of course, won the Cy Young. Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling became the first teammates since 1885 to each strike out 290 or more batters in a single season. They became the first teammates since 1921 to have 8.5 or more wins above replacement. They combined for 18.9 pitching WAR, which was more than 22 of the other 29 teams' pitching WARs altogether. They were also the first D-backs pitchers to win 20 games in a single season. Johnson, Schilling, and Gonzalez ranked number 3, number 4, and number 5 in the NL overall in WAR, respectively. Also, Byung-Hyun Kim, he had a 264 ERA and a 169 average against and a 571 OPS against after taking over the closer role on May 15th. So this, of course, leads the Diamondbacks into the playoffs. The National League Division Series was against the St. Louis Cardinals, the National League Central champions. And in Game 1, Curt Schilling took the ball, and he went 9 innings pitched, 3 hits, 0 runs, 1 walk, and 9 strikeouts. He had a game score of 89, and no one else has done that in the modern time in the postseason since Justin Verlander in the 2012 ALDS Game 5 versus Oakland. Steve Finley hit an RBI single in the 5th to score Damian Miller, and the Diamondbacks won 1-0. They're up 1-0 in the series. In Game 2, the Cardinals actually got the best of Randy Johnson. It happens sometimes. Albert Pujols took him deep in the first for a 2-run shot, and the Cardinals ultimately won 4-1, series tied. Game 3 was the story of an unsung hero, Miguel Batista. He was a guy who had a 5.24 career ERA with 5 different teams, and also 384.2 innings pitched in his career before 2001. The Diamondbacks grabbed him just off of waivers, I believe, and he pitched Game 3. Also, after having a very good regular season, he went 6 innings pitched, 3 hits, 2 runs, 1 walk, and 4 strikeouts in the game. Luis Gonzalez homered, and Craig Counsell also hit a 3-run home run. The Diamondbacks won 5-3. In Game 4, Albie Lopez started for the Diamondbacks. Unfortunately, it didn't go as well for him. He got lit up like a Christmas tree for 4 runs over 3 innings, and the Diamondbacks went 1 for 7 with runners in scoring position, bad offense and bad pitching. The Cardinals ended up winning 4-1. Game 5, Curt Schilling is on the mound, so you already know how that's going to go. 9 innings pitched, 6 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, 9 Ks. The game is tied 1-1 in the bottom of the 9th of Game 5, a winner-go-home game. Matt Williams leads off with a double, and Midre Cummings comes in to pinch run. And then Damian Miller bunted to move Cummings over to third, and Greg Colbrun intentionally walks, which brings up Tony Womack. And Cummings actually got caught stealing, but Colbrun moved over to second on that, which led Danny Batista to pinch hit for Colbrun. And Womack proceeds to do this.
2-2 pitch to Womack. Little floater, left field. Here comes Batista. Here's the throw. Diamondbacks going to the NLCS.
Look at Bob Renly.
Yeah, you don't see managers doing that.
No, managers do not. Like, picture like Jim Leland doing that. You can't.
Imagine, imagine who's like the most Joe
Ron
Torre.
Gardenhire.
Yeah, Joe Torre. Joe Torre.
Tony La Russa.
Yeah, Tony La Russa.
That's not one you're seeing.
You probably think that was wrong.
Yeah, he was disrespecting the game.
Yeah.
So Tony Womack scores the winning run, or I'm sorry, he hits in the winning run with 2 outs. Curt Schilling in the series went 2-0 with 18 innings pitched, 1 run, 18 Ks, and an 0.5 ERA. Steve Finley hit 421 with 2 RBIs. Reggie Sanders hit 357, 471, 643 with an 1113 OPS. And believe it or not, this series actually ended the career of a one Mark McGwire. That was how his career ended, was watching Tony Womack hit that walk-off.
Yeah. And that led to, not completely, but Albert Pujols would then eventually get the first base spot. But not till after actually, there's a little connection there, because in 2002, the Cardinals signed Tino Martinez to put him at first, and the Diamondbacks actually ended up playing against Tino Martinez, and he played a big factor. But
right.
First, they got to face the Braves, the team of the 90s, a team who is 6 years removed from a World Series championship of their own. And you can listen to that episode number 35, on whatever, Apple Podcasts or YouTube. And in Game 1, it is a matchup between 2 of the best pitchers of that generation, arguably the 2 best pitchers of that generation. You could throw, Roger Clemens and Pedro Martinez into that debate as well. But Randy Johnson is able to outduel Greg Maddux. Randy Johnson throws a complete game shutout, allowing just 3 hits and 1 walk and striking out 11. That game score, 91, almost the same game score that he had in that 20 strikeout game. And he was able to do that in a playoff game against the highly touted Atlanta Braves.
Mm-hmm.
And how the Diamondbacks were able to score runs was Luis Gonzalez RBI single and a Reggie Sanders RBI single. D-backs end up winning that 2-0, and they're going to Game 2, where they lose their first game of that series. Miguel Batista pitched pretty well, but the bullpen was able to hold on to things. Maybe a potential
They folded.
foreshadowing as well. But the Braves ended up scoring 2 in the 7th, and they ended up scoring 5 in the 8th, and they ended up winning that game 8-1. Offense didn't really help either. But what can you do? Because when you're going to Atlanta, you got Curt Schilling, one of the greatest postseason pitchers of all time, maybe the greatest starter in postseason history. Curt Schilling throws a complete game, 9 innings, 4 hits, 1 run, 2 walks, 12 strikeouts to go along with a game score of 85. Steve Finley, the center fielder, had himself a pretty good day, 3 RBIs, which were 3 out of the 5 runs the D-backs would end up scoring. They end up winning that game 5-1. They're ahead in the series 2-1. Then in game 4, the offense does the unthinkable. They finally go off on a run, and it's against Greg Maddux. Luis Gonzalez gets himself a 3-run homer, carries that momentum from game 1 against Maddux into game 4 against Maddux. And the Diamondbacks end up winning that game 11-4. And the Braves are pretty much in dire straits after that. They just threw their best arm, and they just lost that game with not the best pitchers beyond that. In game 5, Randy Johnson pitches 7 innings, allows 2 runs. Arubio Durazo hits the go-ahead home run for them in the 5th inning, which puts the Diamondbacks up 3-1. And everything just kind of stays in place from there and leads them to eventually clinching, which is what I'm going to show you right here.
Broadcast booth, not only here on Fox, but the Diamondbacks broadcast booth. To take over as manager. In the air, left center field. Steve Finley calling off Gonzalez. And the Arizona Diamondbacks become the fastest expansion franchise to reach the World Series. In just their 4th year, they will move on to the Fall Classic. Randy Johnson, a 7-game postseason losing streak, coming into this league championship series, goes 2-0 against Atlanta.
You heard that right. They're going to the World Series. Fastest expansion team to ever reach the World Series. They did it. Took them 4 years. They mentioned Randy Johnson. Randy Johnson was awesome in that series. Had a 1.13 ERA in 16 innings. That's just 2 runs in 16 innings. Unthinkable. 19 strikeouts in 16 innings to go with that. Pretty par for the course if you're Randy Johnson. Only 19 in 16 innings, probably below average, but nonetheless, spectacular. Craig Counsell wins the National League Championship Series MVP. He hits .381 with a .905 OPS to go along with 2 doubles and 4 RBI. You can't get a lot of count statistics when you win in 5 games. And Byung-Hyun Kim was untouchable in that series. 5 innings pitched, no runs, 3 strikeouts, and was able to get 2 saves for the Diamondbacks. They are in the Fall Classic.
And who are they facing, Chris? Well, they're facing none other than the New York Yankees, a city grieving. And this would be the year where it makes all the sense in the world for the Yankees to win the World Series.
And also the Yankees, they had kind of overcome some things just on the field. They came back from 2-0 against the A's in the ALDS, and they got past the 116 win Seattle Mariners. So a very impressive team coming out of New York.
That's the very next point I was going to make. I'm glad you brought it up. So in game 1, how do you take the momentum away from the Yankees team that had just down to the 116 win Seattle Mariners? You throw Curt Schilling at him. It's as simple as that. Curt Schilling goes 7 innings pitched, 3 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, and 8 Ks. And the offense explodes off of Mike Mussina, highlighted by a home run hit by Luis Gonzalez to give the Diamondbacks a 3-1 lead.
My God, that was hammered. Just a taste of what that D-backs offense was able to do in Game 1.
Yeah, I mean, there were 57 of those in the regular season, Chris.
Yeah.
Pretty good. So the Diamondbacks win the game 9-1 and go up 1-0. Game 2, Randy Johnson on the mound. 9 innings pitched, 3 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 11 Ks. A game score of 91. The last time there was a game score of 91 in the World Series, that would be Bob Gibson in 1968. If you're a baseball fan, you know exactly how that World Series went for him. Matt Williams was the key player on offense for the Diamondbacks. He hit a 3-run home run to change the game from 1-0 to 4-0. It would stay that way. That was the final score, and the Diamondbacks won that game 4-0. Chris, why don't you play that video?
Yeah, I accidentally pressed Premiere Pro. So if Premiere Pro just comes up in the middle of this video,
that happens.
I apologize, but accidentally clicked on it. But here you go. Matt Williams, still a tight game, 1-0, facing Andy Pettit, the all-time leader in postseason wins. See what happens.
And the 0-1. And a high drive. There it goes. 4-0 Diamondbacks. And Williams a 3-run homer. How about that? He crushed that ball. Matt Williams is a postseason player, and he acknowledges the crowd. You talk about a huge hit, folks. As Tom Brenneman would say, you don't get any better than that.
So the Diamondbacks are going into the Bronx exactly how they wanted to. They're up 2-0. You know, if they just win one game in the Bronx, they're at the very least coming home just to win one. So game 3, the highlight of this game wasn't necessarily in the game, but the most iconic moment years later, President George Bush comes out just almost, a month and a half after 9/11 and comes out and throws out the first pitch of the game. And we don't need to speak. This is a beautiful video. Why don't you play it?
Ceremonial first pitch. And please welcome the President of the United States.
That is a perfect strike.
I mean, there have been Game 7s. There have been, perfect games on the line. I don't know if there's any more pressure on a guy to throw a strike than in that moment.
There's a story, a behind-the-scenes story, that before George Bush went out, he was talking to Derek Jeter, and Jeter goes, "If you don't throw off the mound, they'll boo you."
Oh yeah, you can't throw from the front of the mound.
Hey, that was 60 feet 6 inches if I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
So in the game, Roger Clemens emulates his best George Bush and dominates. Scott Brocious hits a go-ahead single for the Yankees in the 6th. The Yankees end up winning 2-1. That also happened to be the series score. In Game 4, Byung-Hyun Kim is on for a 3-1 save. It's a 3-1 game. He's on for the save, and he promptly gives up the tying home run to Tino Martinez, as Chris is about to show everyone.
Yep. And yeah, I'll talk about it right after the home run.
Here's Tino. 1 on, 2 out. Pitch is swung on and drilled. The deep right center. And a side. And a spur. It is gone. The Bam Tino with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth. He drills a game-tying 2-run home run. Oh, the Bam Tino delivers big time. And the Yankees on the precipice of defeat tie the game at 3. And Tino is greeted at home plate by Paul O'Neill. Double high five, then they hug each other, and the entire team is just mobbing Tino Martinez right around the front of the Yankee dugout. Oh my, what a moment at Yankee Stadium.
That is the legendary John Sterling on the call.
Yeah, this was a very, very interesting game. And, Kurt Schilling goes out there on 3 days rest. Bob Brenly makes that decision, maybe controversial, maybe being a little too aggressive, according to some people, because you have that series lead and you're putting him out there on 3 days rest. And he has a spectacular performance. He goes 7 innings. I think he gets like 9 strikeouts, only allows 1 run, obviously. And he gets capped at 88 pitches. The Diamondbacks had it was tied 1-1 when he came out of the 7th, and then the Diamondbacks scored 2 runs. A couple of relief pitchers came in, so there's probably long rest. And it was decision time for Bob Brenly, and you're deciding to go with the guy who hadn't appeared in the World Series yet, Byung-Hyun Kim, or you go with the veteran who's kind of on long rest, kind of on a high, long rest for the inning and relatively high pitch count. And he goes with Kim, and Kim strikes out the side.
I mean, the fair argument to make with Kim is he's our closer. Like, that's what he's put on the team to do.
That's your closer. And he strikes out the side in the 8th. And Paul O'Neill, who's the guy that was on for that home run, he kind of hit it was an inside-out swing, and it wasn't the hardest hit ball in the world. So Kim was riding pretty well, and it shows just how one mistake can really change the game overall. It was a flat fastball, caught a lot of plate, and that's how it went for Byung-Hyun Kim in Game 4. And it wasn't the end of his night either.
No, it was not. They brought him back out for the 10th, and the clock struck midnight in the bottom of the 10th inning, as well as the calendar flipping to November. Thus making that game the very first Major League Baseball game to ever be played in November. And Derek Jeter stepped up to the plate soon after.
Time in the history of Major League Baseball playing the World Series during the month of November, and for very good reason. Everything pushed back 1 week after September the 11th, pushing the postseason back, and now officially into November as Derek Jeter bats with 2 out, nobody on. Jeter hits it into right. The series is tied.
So there you have it. Derek Jeter hits an absolute moonshot into the crowd at Yankee Stadium. I think that one went farther than Mickey Mantle's alleged home run.
Yeah, I mean, it was on the way up, and I think it hit the top of the roof up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how. And, also a note, that was a 9-pitch at bat.
Yeah.
He fought a lot and, hit that thing.
Perfect piece of hitting.
I mean, just got really into that one.
So now we're into Game 5, 2-2 series, and Miguel Batista is on. Like I said, the guy with a 5.24 career ERA coming into this year, a journeyman, just trying to fit in somewhere. Starting a World Series game, goes 7 2/3 scoreless innings against the New York Yankees in the Bronx as a visiting player. And Byung-Hyun Kim is back on for the save, and Scott Brocious steps in as the tying run in the 9th inning, hoping to repeat the actions of the previous night.
That's 1 for 24 with runners in scoring position in the series for the Yankees.
Tying run at the plate. They're at second, 2 out, 2-0 Arizona. Here in Game 5. Brosius hits one to left. Back at the wall. The Yankees have tied it again.
Don Zimmer. So in extras, this became the Alfonso Soriano game. In the 11th, the Diamondbacks had the bases loaded with 1 out, go-ahead run, of course, at third. And Alfonso Soriano makes a great play to save the game with a catch.
Yeah, Alfonso Soriano also at second base, and I'm not familiar with the career of Soriano, but I mean he's been.
I was just saying, when I watched this video earlier, I was like, wait.
Yeah. So bases loaded in extras, a lot on the line here, momentum, everything.
Bautista, Durazo, and Finley the runner.
Danny Bautista at the plate.
Line drive, caught, diving catch, Soriano 2 out. Joe Torre having the infield and
So that, of course, saves a run and eventually the game for the Yankees. And later in the 12th, Soriano is batting with the winning run in scoring position, and he is about to put the Yankees on top 3-2 in the series, heading back to the desert.
Yeah, he's got a man on second. He's got to drive that runner in here in the bottom of the 12th after no one has scored yet. And here he is.
on 2-1. Sanders. Play at the plate. Yankees win. They lead the series 3-2.
So the Diamondbacks are now heading back to Arizona, playing the 2 biggest games, hopefully the 2 biggest games. It might just be one. But right now, the biggest game in the history of the franchise. This is really the most amount of adversity they've faced the whole year. They did have an elimination game in the division series, but they only had to win 1 game. Now they got to win 2. Granted, it is at their home ballpark, and they do have their 2 behemoths going on the mound. But in Game 6, the Diamondbacks refused to die. They put 15 runs on the board. Danny Bautista led the way with 3 hits and 5 RBIs. Randy Johnson, I love how Randy Johnson puts up 2 runs over 7 innings. That's like a glance to us. It's like, oh yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's
2.57 ERA. That's pretty.
Yeah. You know what? Why not?
Yeah, you know.
The Diamondbacks win 15-2 to force a Game 7. So Game 7, Kurt Schilling, Roger Clemens. Chris mentioned this before we started. Probably the 2 best pitchers who are not in the Hall of Fame of all time.
Whatever, for whichever reasons.
Yeah, for which, I mean, I'm sure that wasn't the case. That wasn't on anyone's minds back then. But
yeah, and little side note, Kurt Schilling, a 2001 Roberto Clemente Award winner, pretty good guy.
Great character.
Yeah.
If you want to look at the character clause, there it is. The game is scoreless through 5. It's an absolute pitcher's duel. Who's going to blink first? Well, the answer to that is Roger Clemens. Danny Bautista hits an RBI double to the center field wall in the 6th inning to make it 1-0 Diamondbacks. But the lead doesn't last. Tino Martinez, same guy who hit the home run to center, hits a game-tying single the next half inning. It's a 1-1 game. Clemens' night was done, and He departs in the 7th after 6 in the 3rd innings pitched, 7 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts. In the top of the 8th, Alfonso Soriano once again plays hero for the Yankees as he hits the go-ahead home run in the 8th against Curt Schilling.
And the pitch he hits, I mean, Schilling did not make a bad pitch at all.
Nothing wrong. On a 0-2 pitch especially, you're supposed to sort of waste one, not give him really something to hit, and this is what happens.
To right, struck out. Schilling has struck out 8. Allowed 1 run on only 4 hits.
Soriano in the deep left field. At the wall, Yankees on top 2-1. The Yankees have got
So there it is. The Yankees are on top in the 8th inning. All that leads them to the finish line is Mariano Rivera. That's the only thing standing between them and a championship, essentially, is 2 shutout innings from Rivera. So Schilling departs after 7 in the 3rd innings pitched, 6 hits, 2 runs, 0 walks, and 9 Ks. Miguel Bautista then comes out of the bullpen for the Diamondbacks to face 1 batter, and he gets Derek Jeter to ground out. So then Bob Bradley brings in none other than Randy Johnson on 0 days rest in Game 7. 0 days rest after pitching 7 innings the previous day, which I guess it makes sense to take him out after 7 because you have him in, you have 15 runs on the board. Like, might as well save him. But this is what he brings him in for. And, of course, Randy goes 4 up, 4 down. And all of a sudden, it's the bottom of the 9th. The Diamondbacks are down 2-1. They're down to their last 3 outs with the best postseason relief pitcher in the history of baseball on the mound. Mark Grace, Damian Miller, and Jay Bell are due up. Grace leads off the inning with a single to center and is immediately replaced by David DeLucci to pinch run. Damian Miller lays down a sac bunt, which goes right to Rivera. He throws to second, but the throw goes into center field, little to the right. Everyone's safe. Men on first and second, no outs for Jay Bell. Jay Bell puts down a bunt. Rivera fields it once again. Throws to third. Makes a good throw, and DeLucci's out at third. So now there's runners on first and second with 1 out. Yankees 2 outs away from a World Series. A double play ball away from winning the World Series with Tony Womack up. Here we go.
It's tied. Going to third is Bell. Tony Womack delivers. It's 2-2.
Chris, if there's one thing I've learned about Tony Womack from learning about this team, it's that he did not crack under pressure. The best game he had on Father's Day, when it mattered the most after his father had passed away, he had the game-winning hit to send the Diamondbacks to the NLCS. And now he just tied the game with a double off of Mariano Rivera in the 9th inning of Game 7.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the hardest feat to do ever, to score off of Mariano Rivera in the playoffs. More men have been on the moon.
Yeah.
More men have been on the moon than have scored off of Mariano Rivera in the playoffs. And it's not like he didn't pitch a lot of innings. He pitched 141 innings in the playoffs.
As a reliever.
Statement.
As a reliever, too.
As a reliever in the 9th inning when runs are at the most premium.
So, obviously Damian Miller was pinch ran for Drake Cummings, who scored the tying run. Craig Counsell actually gets hit by a pitch to load the bases, which got to be tough for Craig Counsell. I mean, he was thinking This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Men on second and third with one out for me to win the game, and you're going to hit me. But hey, force play on. The infield's drawn in. And if you're the Diamondbacks, who do you want coming to the plate? You want the guy who just had the best offensive season in the history of your franchise, not just at that time, but also about 20 years later. Luis Gonzalez steps up with a chance to win the World Series and create history in Arizona.
The chance of a lifetime for Luis Gonzalez. 2-2, bottom of the ninth. Game 7 of the World Series. Bases loaded. Infield in. 1 out. Strike one. The one problem is Rivera throws inside the left-handers. Left-handers get a lot of broken bat hits in the shallow outfield. Shallow part of the outfield. That's the danger in bringing the infield in with a guy like Rivera on the mound. Center field. The Diamondbacks are world champions.
And there it is. The Diamondbacks completely flipped the script on baseball history. You know, the Yankees were 3-time defending champions at that time. I bet if you turned off that game in live time in the middle of the ninth and you took a survey of like 1,000 baseball fans, like neutral fans watching that game, who do you think wins? Probably all of them are going to say the Yankees. Like, that's just how baseball's supposed to go. You have Rivera on the mound. The Yankees have to win that game. The Diamondbacks flip the script. They do the impossible. They score 2 runs off of Rivera in the ninth. Probably could have been more if there wasn't, a walk-off. But the Diamondbacks defy all the odds and win the World Series.
Yeah, it's something, and we'll be talking about this furthermore, but one of the greatest World Series of all time, probably because there were, outside of game 1 and game 6, it was tight pretty much the whole way through. And
Yeah.
there were 3 times where the losing team came back in the ninth and ended up winning. It was crazy drama. And also, Yankee Stadium was rocking.
Bank One Ballpark.
The Diamondbacks ballpark was also rocking. They had a good
Bank
fan
One
base.
Ballpark.
It was
It's now Chase Field, of course.
yes. An insane World Series, and then like an insane story. Like, it's your fourth year of existence,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to do that. Good on the GM mostly.
Yes. So Randy Johnson and Kurt Schilling win co-MVPs. Johnson 3-0 with a 1.04 ERA, 19 strikeouts in 17.1 innings pitched. Schilling 1-0 with a 1.69 ERA, 26 strikeouts in 21 1/3 innings pitched. Miguel Bautista, the unsung hero of this team, 0 earned runs in 8 innings pitched in the World Series, a 1.73 average against, and a 2.49 ERA throughout the whole postseason. The other Bautista, Danny, had a 583, 617, 750, 1365 slash line in the World Series. Steve Finley, a 368 average with a 1005 OPS in the World Series. Schilling throughout the postseason, 4-0, a 1.12 ERA, 6 runs in 48 1/3 innings pitched. That's about a run every 8 innings, I believe.
Yeah.
And 56 strikeouts. A 150, 184, 251, 435 slash line against. Average game score of 78. The most strikeouts ever in a postseason run. The most win probability added ever in a postseason run. Johnson had the 3rd most strikeouts and the 4th most win probability added ever in a postseason run. So the legacy of this team, they were dead to rights after Game 5 in New York. They weren't supposed to win Game 6 and 7 with Pettit and Clemens on the mound, and they sure as hell were not supposed to come back against Rivera in the ninth of Game 7. This team never quit, and of course, they will, as of now, always hold the legacy of the youngest team to win the World Series.
Yeah, the Diamondbacks. I think it's one of the better in terms of circumstances. It's one of the better constructed teams in MLB history. You know, it also shows us the amount of stardom that can get you in certain places. They had three of the best players in the league overall, you know, pitchers and position players. They had Gonzalez, Schilling. Schilling and Johnson were the best two pitchers probably in the MLB at the time in 2001.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's something to admire, especially, you know, just from a management sense. And Bob Brenly seemed to be the perfect manager for that bunch.
Yeah.
Kind of a loose group, good amount of experience, good amount of young talent, just a great overall team, and good with adversity as well.
Exactly. And like Chris mentioned before, they won what some people say was the greatest World Series of all time. You know, a lot of drama in most of the games. I mean, the Yankees coming back twice in a row. The Diamondbacks completely flipping the script in Game 7, 15 runs scored in Game 6 even. You know, this will always like be the team that just did what they weren't supposed to do, and it's in such a good way. And there's
you're not supposed to lose two consecutive games after leading in the ninth inning and then come back and win that World Series.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to do that.
You're supposed to lay down and die after losing two games like that.
Yeah, and you're not supposed to come back against the greatest closer of all time in Game 7 of the World Series.
So the Arizona Diamondbacks of 2001, they went their own way. That's as simple as we can put it. That's their legacy. And just before we close the book on them, I have a little bonus video here. MLB Network a few years ago did a video with Luis Gonzalez where he narrated everything that happened in the ninth inning of Game 7, and they reenacted it with drones at Chase Field, and it was really cool. So we're going to watch this video and then close the book.
Game 7 of the 2001 World Series, one of the best series ever. Series tied at 3-3, Roger Clemens against Curt Schilling right here at Chase Field. With the score tied at 0, bottom of the 6th, Danny Batista at the plate, Steve Finley at first. Danny Batista hits a line drive into left center field, and Steve Finley scores to put us up 1-0. The only thing that kept us from scoring more runs was an amazing play by Derek Jeter, throwing out Danny Batista at third base. With a score tied at 1 in the top of the 8th, Alfonso Soriano took an 0-2 pitch from Curt Schilling into the left field bleachers for a 2-1 lead. In the top of the 8th, with 2 outs, the Yankees up 2-1, Bob Brenly decides to bring in Randy Johnson. He had only had 11 career relief appearances, and he had thrown 100-plus pitches the night before. With the Yankees up 2-1 in the bottom of the 8th, Joe Torre decides to bring in the all-time reliever, Mariano Rivera, with 23 straight saves in postseason play. In the bottom of the 8th, Mariano Rivera struck out the side, including me. But in the bottom of the 9th, Mark Grace led off with a single up the middle. A good start for Arizona. Grace with his third hit. Saying he had a feeling about Mark Grace tonight. With the runner on first in the bottom of the 9th, the next batter bunted right back to Mariano Rivera. He tried to get the runner out at second and threw it away. All runners were safe. First and second, nobody out. Another bunt back to the pitcher, Mariano. This time, he got the runner out at third base. The next batter was Tony Womack. He took a pitch down the right field line for a double to tie the game at 2. After Craig Counsell got hit by a pitch, the infield was drawn in with bases loaded, 1 out, and I got my second chance at Mariano Rivera. At that point in the game, I was hitless with 2 strikeouts. I didn't want to fall behind with Mariano Rivera on the mound. The first pitch, I fouled off. The second pitch, I knew the cutter was coming again, and I got just enough of it to hit it over Derek Jeter's head into short left center field for the game-winning hit. Once the ball left my bat, I knew it was going to fall into short left center field. Game 7 of the World Series, a childhood dream to be able to get the game-winning hit off of one of the best relievers of all time, Mariano Rivera. Our first world championship here in the state of Arizona, a night we will never forget.
So that's a nice, cool little video there.
Very
To
interesting.
officially close
Very
the
interesting.
on the 2001 Arizona Diamondbacks. This was another really fun team to look at.
Yeah, the last 2 teams we've done, 2 greatest postseason runs by a pitcher, and then Randy Johnson is also right up there with
Mhm.
Mad Bum and Schilling. So just a pleasure to talk about there.
Yeah, that's right. So it is time for our favorite time of the show.
Yeah, our favorite time of the show. I don't have to explain it right now because I explained it at the beginning of the show. Explaining that is always pretty tiring. It takes like so many words involved. But I already forgot.
First.
I'm picking first.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, if I'm picking first, then I am going to go with number 10.
Number 10. Oh, yes. This was the team. Okay. When I made this list, I sort of had like a rank of teams that I really wanted you to pick. This team was number 1 on that list. So
There we
and you
go.
know what? Next week is my birthday. So I guess this is my birthday present.
Yes.
You know, Chris, we've gone over a lot of different teams in this time. We've gone through a lot of different scenarios. We have a Game 7 World Series walk-off. We've gone through MVP seasons, Cy Young seasons, you know, Madison Bumgarner's run, just incredibly great seasons. But never before have we done a team that literally saved baseball in their city. I'm talking about the 1995 Seattle Mariners. We get more Randy Johnson talk on this show.
Yes. We get more Randy Johnson talk. And yeah, I'm willing to talk about Randy Johnson anytime we need to. So yeah, saved baseball in Seattle. Ken Griffey Jr., Alex Rodriguez, Edgar Martinez, Randy Johnson.
Jay Buhner.
A stacked team. I'm looking forward
Joey Cora.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching that Game 5 this upcoming week for sure. All right, it is your turn to determine the player we will be talking about next week.
We're going to go with player number 24.
Player number 24. All right, this is going to be a good episode. This man is a 2-time MVP.
Okay.
He is a 2-time WAR winner, and he is the all-time leader in on-base percentage. Ted Williams.
Oh man. I didn't realize we were going this far back with this show. I love it though.
Ted Williams. Yeah, this is our earliest of the show thus far.
Perfect.
There's a thing. Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, this is one of the ones I was more excited for as well. Yeah, this is gonna be a good one for sure.
All right. I love it.
So yeah, that leads us to the conclusion of this show. I hope you enjoyed our episode. Well, we did Mickey Mantle and the 2001 Arizona Diamondbacks. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is called STBNL with Chris Gianta and Daniel Curran. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at Chris_Gianta. Daniel is at Daniel_Curran. And we will be looking forward to we will be looking forward to talking to
I would
you,
be very much looking forward to this.
guys next week about Ted Williams and the 1995 Seattle Mariners. See you next week.